All right, the first thing we're going to do today is last week we talked about some of the deities. Who knows what a deity is? What is it, William?
It's like a god person.
It is a god or goddess. Okay? Now, which one was the oldest god? Elibeth. Horus was the oldest god. So, some of their jewelry that they made, they would put the eye of Horus on there. Alright, the eye of Horus is a symbol that was supposed to provide protection for you. So this one is a bracelet. And this one, you see the beads there? It was probably a necklace. So the eye of Horus was the all-seeing eye. And it was supposed to be met to ensure your safety and health. However, sometimes it was also known as the eye of Ra. Now, who is the god Ra? The sun god. And the sun god was a powerful destructive force that linked, the force came from the heat of the sun. It was a really, really intense heat, which was described as the daughter of Ra, and the eye personified as the goddess, I think that's Wadjet, and associated with a number of other gods and goddesses. So, mainly when you see that, it's associated with the eye of Horus, but sometimes it can be considered the eye of Ra, which was the daughter of Ra, which could be a destructive force. Alright, inside this bracelet, do you see this right here? What is that? Hieroglyphics. Alright, let's move right along. One of the other deities was Anubis. You remember Anubis? Anubis is the one that is responsible for weighing the against the feather of truth. Now this is what we have been used to seeing Anubis look like. However, this is a sculpture of Anubis. Looks completely different there, doesn't it? Just looks like a what? A dog with some really big ears. Okay. Looks like it, doesn't it? Okay, so Anubis was the god of embalming and the god of the dead. He was before Osiris, and he was the one who weighed your heart. Now this one you haven't heard of. This is Thoth. Thoth was the god of wisdom and the inventor of writing, patrons of scribes, and a divine mediator. And you know what a mediator is? Someone who stands between two opposing forces and kind of like keeps the peace. Like, okay, just hang on, wait, okay, that's a mediator. Now, which one of those do you think is Thoth? Which one, Samantha?
The one at the very right.
The one at the very right, because what's he doing?
Writing.
He is writing. And what did we say he was the inventor of? Writing. So what do you think he is writing? What do you think, Weston?
About the notes about this happening.
Absolutely. He's writing about the weighing of the heart. So he's going to record whether the Pharaoh's heart weighed less or more. Yes, Skylar?
You're supposed to have, as you can see in the pictures, the head of the ibis.
The head of what?
The ibis.
Okay.
Which is a type of bird.
And who was this one?
Anubis.
Anubis. Okay, and there's one other god that you don't see in this picture that I told you was really destructive.
Amen.
Yes, and this is Amit. He was the one that weighted, and if the heart weighed more than the feather of truth, what would he do? He would devour it. And then your chances of going into the afterlife were gone. Yes, Park?
What if the heart and the feather were the same?
They wanted it to actually weigh the same. They wanted it to balance out. You were okay then if it balanced out. It was if the feather weighed what?
Same.
Less, and the heart weighed, because that would mean that your heart was full of sin or bad deeds. Okay, so that is Amit. Alright, then you should have in your spiral your listening guide. Yes, no? Alright. Now, these things, I think I showed you this one the other day, did I not? Yes, and crochet out. Okay, remember I told you I wasn't sure what this one was? This is the scalpel that they use to cut you to get your internal organs out. Okay, so for those of you on internet land, these were the hooks that did what? Pulled out your brain. This was the cup that contained the... No.
Resin.
The resin or the oils that they would rub on your body. And this thing also did what? shoved it up your nose, and your brain would drain out into that bowl. Or they could fill that bowl with resin, shove it up your nose, and then pour that resin in so that it filled your brain cavity, and it would be empty. That makes those snacks taste so much better, doesn't it? Okay. These things over here, we're going to get to all of these a little bit later, but you can see the linen cloths here. You can see the bags of natron in the back. Remember, they stuffed those bags of natron back in to keep their body dry. Do you remember what red stone this was, or might have been? No, that's blue.
Oh,
Carnelian. Carnelian. And then somebody said this morning that this one looked like a honeycomb to them. Okay, and these are different types of natural materials that you're going to find that will help you to make the colors of the paint that they would use to paint the sarcophagus. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Alright, now let's go over a few more. Remember the four canopic jars, or some people call them canopic jars, that held the organs? I told you I wasn't sure which ones held which, but I do now. These are the 4 sons of Horus. Well, which one looks most like Horus? That's Anubis, or that one looks more like Anubis. Remember, it's this one. Horus had the head of a falcon. Well, these are supposedly his 4 sons. Alright, let me pull this over here. Enlarge it a little bit. Alright, Egyptians believed that they would need their body in the afterlife. Alright, due to these beliefs, they preserved the bodies of the pharaohs by turning them into mummies when they died. As part of this process, they removed the internal organs and stored them in the jars called canopic jars. There were 4 jars that represent the sons of the gods of Horus. Alright, I can't pronounce all these names. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Imseti had the head of a human. So you remember this one the other day that we said looked like a pharaoh? That's Imseti. Imseti held the liver, and just the liver. Okay? Well, if you were a chicken, he would have held your chicken liver. Alright, this one, I'm not even going to pronounce or try to. He was the head of a falcon right here, and he was guarding your intestines. So that jar would have the intestines in it. Happy or Hoppy was the baboon, and this one held the lungs. Okay? And then the last one, this right here, that looks like Anubis, this is Jumatef. And it had a jackal head like Anubis, and he guarded the stomach. Alright, so, who was this one? Well, you don't maybe not remember who, but Imseti, what'd he guard?
Liver.
The liver. This was some other weird name, and what'd he guard? What'd he guard? The intestines. What did this one guard? The stomach, and this one guarded the lungs. The lungs. Okay, Weston, what's your question? Okay, so that's the 4 canopic jars. All right, next one. This is a piece of natron, the salt that they would use in ancient embalming. All right, it looks kind of crystal. It looks kind of crystal-like. If you pour table salt into your hand and you really look at each little grain, what does it look like? A little crystal, right? So that's the natron. Yes, Mason. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
This is what salt comes from, natron, and they do a whole bunch of stuff.
Possibly. Maybe. But I don't know. Alright. Okay, the next picture is a picture of a mummy wrapped. And I want you to look at how carefully they've wrapped it. They didn't just wrap it around. They actually wove. Look at right here on the mummy's head. See how it looks like straight there, until you made this little bitty box? Yeah, it makes a square.
That's brilliant. They were true architects.
Now, why would you wrap and weave? Elibeth? Absolutely. It's going to stay better, isn't it? Than if you just wrap around and round and round. Now, you might be able to wrap round and round and round on the very, very inside wrapping, but when you get to those outside wrappings, you better weave it, right? Because if it comes undone, the whole thing's going to start coming undone. So they actually wove it. Alright, these are real mummies. So prepare yourself.
Awesome.
Okay?
That is so cool. That is killing it. That's awesome.
Killing it.
All right? Now, believe it or not, they are able to identify mummies based on their DNA and their dental records. Well, when you go to the dentist, how many of you have gone to this before and they've done an x-ray of your teeth? And they do the whole, goes around your jaw and x-rays your teeth. They do that so that they can see what your teeth look like and if there's other teeth up here in your gums that haven't come through yet, if you have problems with your teeth. But on a more kind of morbid side, if for some reason when they find a body somewhere that's been maybe killed, they can use their dental records to identify that person. Okay, so here's the next one. They used Queen Hatshepsut's dental records and her DNA to figure out who she was. Now, they went to this tomb, and they knew that Queen Hatshepsut was buried somewhere around in there, but there was someone else that was buried either near her or with her. I don't remember. And her name was Sityr, I think. And they didn't know which one was Queen Hatshepsut and which one was Sityr. So they pulled a DNA, and this just happened back in 2007. This is just 8 years ago. And it was based on DNA and dental evidence that it was announced that this larger mummy, this one, was Queen Hatshepsut. And the other mummy that was with her was her maidservant, Sityr. Because they really didn't know which was which. So they used DNA to do it. Isn't that crazy? And that was Queen Hatshepsut. And this is still some of the linens and stuff that's still wrapped around her, but you can see her face here.
Wait,
Okay.
didn't you say
She's the one.
the beard?
She did, and she's the one who kept telling her son he wasn't old enough to rule. She'd rule till he got old enough. He wasn't old enough, and she kept telling him that. Remember, Samantha?
How would you know that it was her? You couldn't have DNA samples from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure about that part. I really am not sure about that part. They must have been able to trace back using other mummies, but I'm not real sure. Because that's the first thing I thought of when I read that too. I was like, how did they know what her DNA was? How did they know what her dental records were? I don't know.
They compared it to her style.
Unless they had records written in hieroglyphics about her. Okay, Kennedy?
How did they know that girl was her maid?
Queen Hatshepsut? It was probably written on a cartouche or in her tomb. Are you okay?
Oh.
Skylar?
I'm really excited for Greece.
Okay, well, let's move right along while we're in Egypt. All right, this is Ramses' mummy. Okay, he does. But look how he hasn't even decomposed on his nose or his chin or even his ears. Look at his ears.
Wow.
Okay?
He looks fabulous for mummy.
he looks fabulous for several thousands of years old, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You can even see his cheekbones and his lips. You can make out his lips. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? So, was his embalmers really good ones?
Yeah.
They mummified him well, didn't
I
they?
can see the eye.
Was he the one that was like 90?
He had 90 some odd children.
Whoa.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay? Now, I told you they mummified cats. Okay, now what you don't know is maybe why, so let me tell you why. There's evidence that every cat was considered a demigod. In other words, they weren't a god or goddess, but they were close to it. Okay? According to theory, the cat was a semi-divine being and could not be owned by a human. So anyone in this room, if we were in ancient Egypt, we could not own, quote unquote, own a cat. Okay? The reason that we couldn't own a cat is because we were just a regular human being. The only person that could own a cat was the Pharaoh, and that was because he had a very, very high status. So basically, all cats in Egypt were owned by no one except the Pharaoh. Now, because of that, cats were under his guardianship, and if you harmed one, you would be punished because of treason. Now, I told you a long time ago what they thought cats were. That they were what?
Demigods.
That they were people that had come back. They were your what?
Ancestors.
Ancestors, okay? So this cat's been mummified, and you can see it's all wrapped here. This little tag is just a tag that the archaeologists put on there to where they found it and what number it was that they found. Now here's the whole body of a cat mummified. Okay, now it is still wrapped. Okay, so everybody last period thought, well, gosh, that's weird. No, it's still wrapped in the linens. When a cat died, their human family, you didn't own them, they were part of your family, would go into deep mourning and shave off their eyebrows to mourn the cat. Okay? The cat would then be mummified and buried along with things that it needed for the afterlife, such as milk, mice, and rats. So they buried the stuff with the cat that it needed. Okay? The cats were often taken to this site, I can't even pronounce it, to be buried. But tombs have also been discovered in Giza and different places. For example, a tomb in Beni Hazen was discovered in 1888, which contained an estimated 80,000 mummified cats. 80,000 cats were buried at that tomb, okay? Now listen, shh. The deceased cat was wrapped in fine linen and taken to be embalmed, just like you would embalm the pharaohs. Diodorus recorded that the deceased cat was treated with cedar oil and such spices as have the quality of imparting a pleasant smell and would preserve the body for a long time. So they mummified their cats and got them ready for the afterlife as well. If you need to go. What? Okay, next one. You saw this the other day. King Tut's sarcophagus made of what? Pure gold. Okay, when the Egyptologists found him, remember he was encased in four different sarcophagus. And when they got to the inner one, this is what it looked like. And once they would have opened this, they would have found King Tut. Okay, I think this one is his death mask. The only problem I have with this being his death mask is I was thinking his death mask was just this part. So this might actually be his outside sarcophagus. I'll have to look and see. Okay, but you do see the crook and the flail there. Okay, and he had a cartouche. And if you look, this is the whole symbol for the name Tut. And in his name, Tutankhamun was the name Ankh, which meant life. So that symbol right there would have meant Ankh, or life. Then all this symbol right here would have been Amun. Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun. See it? That's his full name. And then they put what his job was. He was the ruler of Anu, or Helopius. I can't even pronounce this word. Which was in Upper Egypt. Okay? King Tut was not buried in a pyramid. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings. Is the Valley of the Kings in Upper or Lower Egypt? Upper. So he would have been a king in Upper Egypt. So this is what his cartouche looked like. So anytime you wanted to know who's in that tomb, you looked at that cartouche and it told you Tutankhamun, ruler of Upper Egypt. Alright, hang on, let me hit pause. Okay, so leaving the cartouche, this is the Valley of the Kings where King Tut would have been found. Alrighty, and you can see right here's the entrances that they found to the tombs. They were in the hillside and they went deep down into the ground. Now this is just a small layout of his tomb. When you went in, there were different chambers. You can see his furniture right here, right there. Remember we saw the video the other day? The soldier, the statue that was in there, the furniture, the tables.
There was stuff everywhere.
There was stuff everywhere. Okay, and then there would have been a room over here for storage. And there's probably a lot more to it than this. But when you went into King Tut's chamber, where he actually was, see how the white represents the walls? Look at this. Here's a wall. Here's a wall. Here's a wall. And here's a wall. Because they wanted to make sure that you were not going to be able to find their kings, what? Easily. Yeah. They wanted you to have like a maze. So you'd go into that first wall and see another wall and think, well, I've hit a wall. We're done. that you had to dig through to get into that entrance or that inner tomb where he was. And then once you got there, you still had to go through four more like coffins, didn't you, to get to him? Because remember they told us he was buried in 4. All right, and then now this one freaks some people out. Today they can take digital technology and they can take a skeleton and they can go back and they can add tendons and ligaments and muscles and fat and skin to figure out what that skeleton, what that person might have looked like. This is what they think King Tut looked like.
Looks like a girl.
A lot of people say it looks like a girl.
Because he has eyeliner.
Hey, well, all the Egyptians wore, especially the pharaohs, wore that dark eyeliner under their eyes. Okay? So, how many of you, that is not what you expected him to look like? Yeah, me either.
Oscar's just by you saying what you're saying.
All right.
I would hate to like obey.
So that is a digital image of what they think King Tut might have looked like. All right? Now, I told you to glue your standard on your next page. I'm going to give you a sheet of pictures that looks like this. Okay? You're going to cut out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're going to have 8 different things that you cut out, okay? So, Jenny, will you take scissors around? And if you need glue, raise your hand. You will get my glue only if you need it. Alright, so your standard 6.19 is on your next free page. And then you're going to divide your page to look like what you see on the screen. You will have your standard. Then you will glue ancient Egyptian inventions. And then you will divide it. Now, if I were you, somebody said, how many do I need to divide onto the first page? Let's just do one and then you can draw a line. And do one and then you can draw a line. I went ahead and put mine up there just so you know what we were doing. But you have 3 columns. Invention, picture, and description. Okay, so if you're watching in internet land today, we divided up our paper into 3 different columns. And these lines that are horizontal, we are actually going to draw as we go. So just so you guys know out there what we're doing in class today, that's how we're doing it. All right, who wants to read the first standard? You will stop at the word systems. Okay, Anna, go for it.
Summarize important achievements of Egyptian civilization, including the agricultural and irrigation system.
Okay, so the very first thing that it wants us to talk about is one of their inventions called the what?
Agriculture and irrigation.
Okay, so you're going to write agricultural and irrigation systems in your first box. Okay, and it's on the board or it's on your standard. All right, there are 2 pictures that you have for irrigation system, and I'm going to call out one, the shadoof. Can you find a picture of it? Okay, when you find the shadoof, should be this one. You're going to glue it into your next column that says picture. Okay, so this one is the shadoof. All right, now we have a picture here on our next slide of the shadoof, right? It's the exact same picture you have. I think you already know the purpose of a shadoof. It was to what? What ultimately did it do?
Collect water.
Collect the water to do what?
Water the crops.
To water the crops. Okay, so let's look at this and we're going to summarize. When you summarize, do you write a big, huge novel? No, you write a little short something about it. Okay, the purpose of a shadoof was it was a hand-operated device. Why did they say it was hand-operated? You had to pull the lever down, right? To dip the bucket in what? In the water source. And it was used for lifting water, invented in ancient times and still used in India, Egypt, and some other countries to irrigate land. All right, let's go back to this one. I already have a definition for shadoof written for you shortly. Okay, it's summarized. So a shadoof is a hand-operated device. Will it work if you don't operate it by hand?
No.
No, you can stand there and stare at it all day and it is just going to hang around and do nothing because it won't do anything until you do something to it. Unless you have some kind of magical powers, it's not going to do anything.
This isn't the 21st century, people.
Used for lifting water. Now, what water? Just out of a creek?
The Nile.
The Nile? A river? Could it work at a lake? Could it work at a creek?
Yeah.
Could it work in a canal? How about a pond? So you could get it from any water source, right? So it's a hand-operated device for lifting water to irrigate the land for what? Crops. And that's what you need to write for your shadoof. So in your next block, so now you can draw your line underneath that one. So go ahead and draw your horizontal line across there. And then we're going to write agricultural and irrigation system again. Now you should recognize another picture that is an irrigation system. What is it?
The canal.
It's the canal. So we're going to move this one in.
Move it in for the kill.
All right, the canal. The overall purpose of the canal is the same as the shadoof. It is to irrigate what? It's to irrigate crops, right? But does it work the same way? No. Okay, so we have another agricultural and irrigation system, a canal. All right, let's go back to this picture. We know the purpose of a shadoof. A canal's ultimate purpose is the same thing, to water the crops, but it does it in a different way. Since earliest times, Egypt used sophisticated canals for irrigation along the Nile River and the Nile Delta.
Just like they used back in Mesopotamia.
Yes. The purpose of these canals was to maximize. What does maximize mean? As much as possible, and to extend. What does extend mean? As far as possible, the life-giving fresh water, and it brought something else in. Silt. And what was that silt used for? It was rich, fertile soil that would grow your crops faster and better, right?
We already know.
Okay, so you were trying to get your water and silt to as much of an area of the Nile as you possibly could. So, let's go back to our chart, and here's your summarization. A canal is used to maximize and extend the amount of water and silt to as much farmland as possible. Okay, once you get that written, you're going to draw a line under that one, and then you're going to go up to your standard and mark off agricultural and irrigation systems, because check, we have those. Okay? I'm waiting. I am waiting. All right, the next one is going to be the invention of a calendar. All right, so you have your line drawn, and now we're going to move in the calendar, because that's the next thing our standard talks about, is the calendar. And you probably have figured it out. Yes, this is the calendar.
Which way does it go?
Well, because you don't see the outside, you can glue it any way you want to because it all looks the same on your picture. But I'll show you what I mean. See the calendar here? If you had this part, you would be able to tell which was the top and bottom. The bottom has two people standing here. But because you can only see this, everything looks the same because it's drawn circularly. Alrighty, so we've got the Egyptian calendar next, glued in. Okay, the Egyptian calendar. Let's look at the information on the calendar, because some things are the same that we use today and some things are a little bit different. It was originally based on the lunar cycle of 12 months. What's lunar? Moon, okay? Of 12 months. How many months do we have in a year? 12. So that's the same, right? That's the same as ours, right? 12 months in a year. Is ours still based on the seasons and the moon and all that? Anybody know that answer? You say yes? Okay. All right, Egyptians grouped into 3 seasons. How many seasons do we have?
4.
4. Okay, they had 3 seasons with 4 months in a season. We have 4 seasons with 3 months in a season. Okay?
Well, I could actually kind of see that because, well, it's Egypt. There's practically no snow there at all.
Okay. Alright, they based it on the rise and the fall of the waters of the Nile. But there was a little problem. However, the flooding of the Nile began each year around the end of June, and the floods occurred within a range of 80 days, but they weren't accurate enough, so you couldn't say the flood is going to start on June the 25th, because it might be the 24th, 23rd, 20th, 19th, 18th, or it might be the 30th, or it might be July the 1st, so it wasn't accurate enough to base your calendar on that. Okay, so the Egyptians noticed that when the Nile would rise, it would coincide with the rising of a certain really bright star called Sirius. It was the brightest one in the sky. So they based their year on the cycle of when Sirius, the brightest star, appeared. Now, when you go to the beach, do you know what the rise and fall of the tides are based on? The moon. The moon. The moon is what controls when your tide comes in and when your tide goes out. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Alright, so let's go back to our chart where we have the calendar. Alright, here's what we've written, what we wrote last period. It was based on the lunar cycle. Alright, on the cycle of the moon. It had 3 seasons, 12 months in a year, 4 months in a season. You could say it had 3 seasons, 4 months per season, 12 months in a year. Yep. And it was based on their year was over and ended and started when the brightest star Sirius appeared in the sky. Alright, hit record. So now we can go up here and we can check off calendar. Check. Got it.
Wait, don't change it yet.
I'm not. Alright, what's the next thing? Read this one to me, Mason.
Main features of the monumental architecture and art, such as the pyramids and Sphinx of Giza.
Okay, there are 2 monuments or pieces of art or sculptures listed in that standard. What's the first one, Kennedy? Pyramids. Alright, so we're going to move the pyramids in next. Okay, so your next picture is the pyramids.
Wait, what was the invention? Pyramids.
Pyramids. Alright, and the pyramids are where?
Giza.
Giza. So invention, we're going to write pyramids at Giza. Then we're going to put the pyramids in. Here we go. Alright, the main features of the pyramids. This is Khufu's pyramid. His is the biggest pyramid of those 6 that you see. Because you should see 3 big ones and 3 small ones. Correct? Okay, Khufu's is the biggest pyramid. But inside his pyramid, it's not just hollow and one big room. It's divided up into chambers. And you can see here that there was a grand gallery, there was an ascending passageway and a descending passageway. Ascending means going up, descending means going down. You had the queen's chambers in here, the king's chambers in here. You had air shafts that were in different places of the pyramid so the air could flow through. You had the weight relieving chambers that were here. You had an entranceway. And then you know that the pharaoh was ultimately buried in his pyramid, right? Okay, now one other thing right here. You see this top part right here? Looks a little bit different than the rest. That's because they told you in a video, and I've told you before, that the whole pyramid was covered in what, Samantha?
Limestone.
Limestone. And limestone had a white, ivory-like color. It made them look glistening white. They covered the whole thing in limestone. But when the city of Cairo was being built, they went and chipped all that limestone off to build the city of Cairo. And all that's left on there is the tip of what's on Khufu's pyramid. Now, Deep inside the pyramid lays the pharaoh's burial chamber, which would be filled with treasures, an item for the pharaoh to use in the afterlife. The walls were often covered with carvings and paintings. Near the pharaoh's chamber would be other rooms where family members and servants would be buried. They were often small rooms that acted as temples, so there were small temples inside the pyramid, and larger rooms that were used for storage. Very narrow passageways led to the outside. Sometimes they would put fake burial chambers or passageways that they would use to try to trick grave robbers, so that when they got in there, they would think, oh, it's empty, it must not be here, somebody's gotten here before me, and they would quit looking. Because there was such valuable treasure buried in the pyramid, grave robbers would try to break in and steal the treasure. Despite the Egyptians' efforts, nearly all of the pyramids were robbed of their treasures by 1000 BC. Alright, so let's go back here to pyramids at Giza. And we're going to move in. Where do I have it written? Here it is.
Wait, I know something.
Okay, hang on, Skylar. Hold your horses, man. Alright, here we go. Used as a burial for the pharaoh, family members and servants were also buried there. So used as a burial for the pharaoh, family members, and servants. There were chambers filled with treasures. Small rooms were temples, and large rooms for storage, and there were also fake burial chambers. Okay, when you get done writing the definition, because it's almost time to go, you're going to move your other pictures in the order they go. So you have the pyramids, then you're going to have the, right here, Sphinx. Just glue them on so you won't lose them. Alright, after the Sphinx, we have the evolution of writing called what?
Hieroglyphic.
Hieroglyphics is next. Okay, and then we have the invention of papyrus, which is this one. So go ahead when you get done writing and glue those last 3 pictures in so you won't lose them before tomorrow. Okay, those of you in internet land, you can do the same thing, and tomorrow we'll pick up on this and finish it up. Alright, see you, bye.